Welcome to Tutor Boot, where each week we talk about news related to HR and the world of work. We toot the news we like and we boot the news we don't like. I'm your host, Stacey Nordwall, a serial joiner of early stage tech companies as their first in or only HR person. And joining us for Tutor Boot this week, we have Aubrey Blanche Sariano. Welcome back.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy here to talk about some more news.
I am excited you're here. For anyone who didn't hear your previous episode, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Aubrey, and my day job is that I'm the vice president of equitable operations at CultureAmp. So I look after people ops, at equity and inclusion, sustainability, and the corporate foundation. And then I'm also a consultant who works on issues of equity, ethical and responsible AI, DEI strategy, climate equity programs. So I kind of equity is the through line of everything I do, and I do that kind of in my side hustle and my full-time gig.
Awesome. Which is why I'm super excited for you to be here today and talk about some of these articles because I know you're going to bring an equity perspective that I might not have fully honed yet. And I'm really looking forward to learn. We're going to start with our first article that's from Inc. This one is 5 employment law changes set to hit the workplace in 2025. The recap for this article, they cover 5 employment law changes expected to come in to effect this year, and that will likely affect most businesses of all sizes. They say this will take extra effort to stay in compliance with and stay aware of, especially because some of these are still kind of up for grabs or going back and forth. The 5 policy changes are related to pay transparency, higher minimum wages, simpler contractor classifications, workplace safety standards, and the overtime pay salary threshold. I feel like we kind of maybe have to go through these one by one.
Yeah.
But what did you think? Maybe should we start with pay transparency?
Yeah, I said I would give the article a toot, and the reason I would do that is because I think, especially for really small teams, even if you really intend to operate in compliance with the law, like because the US has so many like federal but also state changes, especially for companies that are remote or have entities in a bunch of different states, it's actually incredibly difficult to stay on top of all this legislation. And so I think
Yeah.
these compilation articles are really helpful where someone can quickly skim and say, oh, these 4 things apply to me. I need to go learn more. So
Yeah.
I really appreciate someone who's done the pre-work to help like well-meaning folks speed up a little bit because it's really fucking challenging.
Yes. Yes. I
Um,
agree.
I controversially have mixed feelings about all the pay transparency legislation.
Ooh, tell
So
me.
like basic pay transparency is a good thing.
Yeah.
Like that's my statement. But I think it goes back to like there isn't sort of a standard structure of legislation for this law. And so it makes it really, really complex to implement for businesses. And
Yeah.
so I wish there was more consistency in what was required in the laws. And that's the spicy thing is that I think
Mm,
the intention's right, but like the implementation, recognizing that we're having to do it this at the state level because the federal government is not going to do this.
yeah.
But anyway, that's kind of my opinion. I thought the article gave a really good strategy for this, which I agree with, which is kind of pick the most stringent law you're accountable to, follow that one, and you kind of get compliance with the rest of them for free. But
Yeah.
I think you need to be able to make the case and you need to have leadership that says, like, yes, we will go above and beyond our strict compliance requirements because you're going to be doing more in some jurisdictions than you technically have to.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that take as well. And I think one of the things they mentioned in the article was thinking that like because of this needing to get um, to be compliant across a bunch of different laws, maybe that will actually make people abide by them in a better way. Like instead of putting these salary ranges where they're like 100 to $300,000, it's like we know that is not an appropriate salary range for a job, right?
Right. Like,
Like let's be real about what the range is.
yeah, absolutely. So full disclosure, I used to work here, but so at Atlassian. But I actually really appreciate the way their job ads are structured for pay transparency. So if folks are looking for someone who's doing it really well, I think they're doing it in a rad way where they give the range, they talk about the different zones that they
Mm.
pay. So they do pay by geography, but
Oh,
when
right.
they give the range, they also specifically say, like, we tend to hire in the bottom of this range. And
Mm,
so
okay.
I think that's really great, not only because it gives an actual number amount, but because I know a lot of recruiters will say, oh, we can't put the whole range because everyone will want at the top. Literally just tell people you're not going to do that as baseline. And
Right.
if people
Right.
opt out, like respect to them. But I just appreciate the way that they've dealt with those nuances of like the operational challenges and the transparency. I found it really high quality.
Okay, that's great. That is a great tip. I haven't looked at their job ads.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, it's a good model and it works for them. They have a like ultra remote culture, and so
Yeah.
they've had to solve like a very specific set of pay transparency challenges that company that's in a smaller number of entities and more co-located, it might not be relevant. But
Right, right. Well, and to your point, like that's part of the thing is like if you particularly if you are hiring a lot remotely, if you are in number of different cities or states within the US or even and abroad, like you'll have to think about this and develop a strategy for what that looks like. And I agree that just for really the sake of ease, it's generally best to just adhere to whatever is the most stringent and make that your policy.
yeah, that's generally good compliance advice.
Yes. What did you think about the conversation around higher minimum wage? This is another
Yeah.
one where it's like we'll cobble it together by city and state and locality, and it'll be different in every one.
I mean, again, I don't love that that is the tactic we have to take. But
Yeah.
like hands down, pay people more.
Yeah.
Like you're getting no argument from me. I think that, my analysis, we have this systemic devaluing of like service-based labor
Yeah.
that's disproportionately done by women, by people of color. Um, so I think that's really important. One thing to note that wasn't in the article, but is like a big thing of mine is there's a push to get rid of the clause in the FLSA that allows disabled people to be paid sub minimum wage.
Mm-hmm.
And so like that also feels relevant to bring up here that I'm like, yeah, get rid of that. Like
Yeah.
that's horrific.
Yeah, that is,
Anyway,
yeah.
I'm pro paying people at the bottom of the pay scale. Absolutely pay them more. That has not moved since the 70s, and we know that cost of living has gone up. We also know like the other thing is like it really frustrates me because a lot of the jobs that are paid at that are actually quite high skill, high emotional intelligence required jobs, and I think we should be specifically compensating for that type of skill.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I looked just to see, it's like, okay, the federal minimum wage is still $7.25 an hour, which if you worked full time, you would still be below the poverty line
Right.
at that rate. And with some of the rates that they're saying is the new minimum wage, which would be $15 an hour, and some of these 31,200 a year, which at full time is just below what the poverty line is for a family of four.
Right.
So when you're thinking about like what these minimum wages are, it's great, like increase the minimum wages. But even you have to also put it into context because like as you said, the cost of living has gone up. The skills that people are using have to be like translated into this as well. It boggles my mind really that the federal minimum wage is $7.25 an hour. Like I just
And
uh
that's for non-tipped folks.
oh right.
So I might be misspeaking because I have not Googled this, but the last time I checked, unless you're in one of these jurisdictions where minimum wage has been hiked, I believe that the tipped minimum wage is something like 235 or like 285. Like it is a truly unlivable amount of money.
Yeah,
And I think that's terrible because we also know that means, and there's lots of research that shows, for example, servers and service workers are at significantly higher risk of things like sexual harassment and abuse because they are dependent on the largesse of their clients to pay their damn rent. And I
right.
think that is absolutely a human rights violation. Like, I think if your business cannot survive paying someone enough to have a decent roof over their head, your business maybe doesn't need to survive.
Yeah, yes. I think if you are relying on not paying people in order to have a business, like you're not doing your business plan right. Like that's not a
Correct.
successful
Like,
business strategy.
like human beings being paid so that they can eat is again like the bar is in hell.
Oh, it really is. It really, really is. Okay, let's go on to the next one. This one was really interesting as well. This is about contractor classifications. And it seems like this is one where it's been kind of bouncing back and forth for a while. I think, because of gig economy for sure, there must be people lobbying all over the place, and there are to get people classified as contractors so they're not considered as employees. But yeah, what was your take on it?
Yeah, so I think this is like perpetually an issue that people look at. I think
Yeah.
there's like I think the idea of the like six factors that are weighted was obviously meant to be like encouraging people to become employees rather than contractors,
Mm,
because that comes with more benefits. That's just more labor friendly. That said, like my honest advice is don't spend too much time worrying about complying with that because there's no chance that it survives the change in administration.
yeah.
My honest prediction. So yeah, I do like the idea that people aren't, using contractors in places they should be hiring employees, but I think this is one of the places where it wouldn't be front lines on my fight. Like
Yeah.
like I'm much more on the like let's push for unionization as like pro labor things because if people can get those kinds of workplace protections yeah, anyway, not to say it's not important, but I think there are some better tactics that we can use and we might just let this lapse.
Yeah. No, I mean that makes sense, right? Because there's going to be a lot to potentially prioritize. A lot of things are going to be happening, and you're really going to, as HR folks, really have to focus on what are the things that are going to be most impactful, the things that you really have to react to because you can't and probably shouldn't react to everything.
Yeah. So it's a little, I that sounds a little dismal, but again, I think if you're prioritizing where you think the biggest impact can happen, I think that's not going to be the biggest area of change for workers.
Hmm. All right, and here's another one. The new workplace safety standard. So this is one where they were predicting this hasn't happened yet, but they were predicting that the Trump administration would overturn two OSHA rules. One of the rules was one that allowed employees the right to appoint a representative to accompany OSHA officials on workplace inspections, and the other was requiring employers nationwide to create and implement heat safety plans. Um, so they're predicting that the Trump administration would overturn these two rules.
Yeah, and I'm not as familiar with sort of the debate and the action around sort of someone accompanying the OSHA official, but I think given the fact that in general employers don't like it, tells me I should support it.
Yeah,
Like I I tend to be pro like a pro worker workforce, but I think the heat safety standard thing is actually like deeply upsetting.
yeah,
In the sense that like climate change is ravaging the planet and like heat safety is becoming more and more relevant to people in like high skill but low wage roles. And so I can see this really affecting kind of the most vulnerable people, especially when you think about like the like intersectional injustice kind of angle of this. So we know that like people of color, for example, tend to live in places that heat up disproportionately compared to that because they're often pushed into places that have less green space, etc.
mm,
And so their workplaces also tend to be that way. And so like this is in general a problem that we know will disproportionately impact immigrants. This will
yeah,
disproportionately impact people of color. And so I think there's multiple reasons to actually be really concerned about this change.
yeah. I mean, I'm in Phoenix, and the idea of people working basically 6 months out of the year where it's over it's near 100 or over, thinking about people who are doing construction or whatever like that. I'm like, it's a must. Like it is a true health and safety issue for those folks. And yeah, I'm not like particularly familiar, but I had the same kind of response of like, oh, if the employers didn't like it, then I probably should should like it. And I think also, it's interesting too, right? Because there are there are always ways if they didn't like the rules around who could accompany the OSHA officials, they could update that, right? Like they could lobby, they could email, they could write the OSHA people and say like, hey, we actually think that, someone who accompanies the OSHA officials should be required to do XYZ or have this relationship or whatever like that. They could do that, but they're not doing that. They're just saying, no, we don't like it, get rid of it. So I think it's always interesting too when you read about these things, like what the reactions and responses are. And they're not looking to make a compromise there. So that tells me something.
Right. Exactly.
And all right, so we'll move on to, is this our last one of the five? It is. The overtime pay salary. So this is something I've been watching because we've seen it was enacted, it was rolled back. Texas overturned it. So it's been kind of back and forth for folks. I think this is one people are going to have to continue to be paying attention to because it seems like it will continue to be disputed. But what was your thought on it?
Yeah, I mean, this is an example of where like my thought is like I'm pro the more pro labor
Yeah.
perspective. That said, this is one of those things where I think it's a reasonable assumption that like these things that are rolled back are going to stick, because not
Yeah.
necessarily like Trump can't change this threshold with an executive order. But knowing the particular court in Texas that it comes out, which tends to have very conservative rulings in general, so people tend to use that court specifically because they will
Yeah.
get pro-employer rulings. But we also know the percentage of the judiciary that was appointed during Trump's previous term is like, I'm just not optimistic. Like, I think that that decision in Texas will be upheld by higher courts if it's challenged. And so,
Yeah.
obviously, talk to your attorneys if you have outside counsel, like, stay on top of this, get news alerts, whatever you need to do to stay on top of it. But my prediction, which I don't love, is that the threshold's going to stay.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. And it was again interesting to me, right? The salary exemption threshold is 35,568. That seems so low to me. To yeah, it seems very low. But to your point, given the court that it came out of, the administration, is that likely to change in the next 4 years? Probably not. So yeah.
But this is where I kind of like gently nudge a business and I'm like, you can do more than the law dictates.
That's true. Yeah, exactly.
Like you were not legally prevented from following the previous threshold. And again, I think speaking as someone who spent her career in tech, like this kind of law isn't as relevant for us just because we tend to have higher paid salaried workers.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that we're seeing more and more this shift to like we would hope to see, especially this is horrific, in the changes we're going to see in the availability of labor in this segment. I think if the new administration does start to carry out the sort of anti-immigrant like deportation policies that they've threatened, that we're going to see labor in this particular segment get squeezed in major ways. And so I can see that as potentially a counterbalancing force where
Mm,
employers are actually forced to offer better wages because there's a shortage of talent to fill the roles that they need filled.
mm. Yeah.
Like, not to say that's a good thing. Like,
Yeah, I know.
it's such a horrific reason. But that is something that I'll be
Yeah.
watching to see how those dynamics are playing out.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. All right. Well, and here's another, this is somewhat related, this article, also from HR Dive. Trump names former EEOC Commissioner Keith Sonderling Deputy Labor Secretary. So as it says in the title, he's named this person. Sonderling started his career as a management side labor and employment attorney. He worked for the Department of Labor during the previous Trump administration, notably as the acting deputy administrator of the Wage and Hour Division, and later became one of the 5 EEOC commissioners. During his tenure, he dissented from the EEOC's guidance that anti-bias laws cover LGBTQ workers and that the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act also extends to abortions and the use of contraception. He was also, this one just made me laugh. He was also part of the WHD launching a self-audit program, which encouraged employers to self-audit their compensation practices for compliance with the FLSA.
I find this whole thing super confusing.
Did you?
Like, um, Trump's picks for DOL are just like more pro-labor than I ever would have anticipated.
Interesting.
I'm not saying like everything is sunshine and roses, but I
Yeah.
think my baseline assumption was that the administration is going to be so hostile
Yeah.
to workers in so many ways that choosing people who have supported like any measure of pro-worker policies is just like I cannot figure it out.
Yeah.
But that said, Trump has been like strangely for him, not strange in the world, like pro-union and like butting up to unions. And so I've been trying to think through like what's the political strategy there.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I just think it's an interesting observation is it's looking at the short list, neither of them were the people on the short list I would have imagined would be selected.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I had no idea who this person was before I read this article. So I was kind of reading through and I thought like, okay, well, at least he like has kind of done some of this. He's been in this world before. So like that seems an improvement over some of the other picks where like who knows what relevant experience they have. So there was that. And I think, I guess, yeah, to your point, maybe it is a little bit more like not as wild of a choice as one could envision being the choice. I still didn't like it though, but I guess it's like in the things that I could have gotten, it's probably not as bad as it could have been.
Yeah. I think that's it is like my baseline, and maybe this is a lesson to me, is like I
The
start with like
bar
this
is in
is
hell.
so bad. Yeah, the bar is in hell. But like when I think about how actively hostile this administration is to so many things, like this just isn't it's not what I expected.
Hmm.
We'll see where it goes. I would say stay
Yeah.
tuned, monitor the situation.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good take. Um, yeah, especially because as we said, like there's potentially so many things that are going to be coming at us. We might as well reserve our energy for the real big stuff and hope that this is just a small thing that we can keep in the back of our mind, but not at the front. Okay, and this is our last article. It's from Forbes. It is titled Why Soft Quitting at Work Could Be More Dangerous Than Quiet Quitting. The recap is that soft quitting is a slow and subtle shift in behavior toward detachment and disengagement that even the most attentive managers may not notice, and it eats away at the culture because it affects team morale, productivity, and the organization. Companies can address soft quitting by engaging employees and fostering emotional connection, purpose, and growth. What did you think?
Heck a boot. This is like some weird capitalistic propaganda I just cannot get on the train about.
Yeah.
Like I love my work and I get a lot of purpose from it and I'm kind of a workaholic, but I don't see that as some like morally superior orientation. And like I'm actually a fan of people being really clear about the expectations, delivering against those and going the fuck home.
Yeah.
Like if that works for them, I think that's a completely fine orientation to work. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, like I'm into the culture, I'm into that, but I just don't necessarily think my way of doing things is better than someone else for whom their purpose and their meaning and their emotional energy goes into a different part of their life.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I read it and at first I was like, what are you talking about? Like what even is this? It is very like the boogeyman hiding under your desk, that not even the most attentive managers will know. And I'm like, well, what is it? And one thing they said was that that soft quitting was akin to the concept of lying flat, which originated in China and is, quote, a rejection of the pressures of modern life, particularly the relentless demands of work and career progression, end quote. And I was like, cool. Like,
Right.
great.
Like
So
I guess
what's the problem?
my ethic is like it's a perfectly acceptable position to just like um want to be good at your job and not like want the top job. And I think
Yeah.
there's something like uniquely toxically American, first of all, as an expat. Like it's
Yeah.
a very culture here in Australia. But I think that like we've been socialized that like the correct orientation is to want to climb a ladder, to want to be in charge. And like I actually think it's super healthy that and I don't think it needs to be this like catastrophic trend. It's literally just like starting to normalize that people have different relationships to work. And what I'm
Mm.
not saying is like if you're getting paid, you should do your job. Like
Yeah.
I think that's the fair exchange there. But like you don't have to like be the world's best at a particular thing, or you don't have to be striving for that promotion. And I think it's also need to normalize that like one person throughout their career might be in different periods. So there
Yes.
are periods of your life where like work isn't the center of your life, whereas there are periods where you might feel more ambitious. And so I don't think this is just like between people. It's also recognizing that people have different seasons of how they relate to their jobs and their careers.
Yeah, absolutely. I am a big fan of that. Having burnt myself out a number of times, I am a big fan of recognizing, in this moment in particular, when I don't feel the need to be at work or like striving and all the time, that's because I'm just not in that era right now. Like that's not the era for me. And that's fine. And other people are still doing that. And I don't like good for them. I don't feel the need to do it. Like I
Right.
have done it.
But I think this also comes back to like, because I tend to think of like, what's the responsibility of the employer to
Yes.
start out with? And it's like the responsibility of the employer is to be clear about what's expected of someone. Yes,
Yes.
that should be reasonable and commensurate with, say, if you're paying them for full time, that like the work can be done within the scope of a full-time role.
Yeah.
Um, and so, but I think that's on the employer to say, like, oh, you're slacking off, but like you have deep emotional connections with your coworkers. It's not a fucking reasonable job requirement. Like,
Yeah.
if you want to do that, that's great. I personally like am really connected to my coworkers and I love working with them, but like it's not appropriate to like dictate something like that as opposed to like this is the impact that we need you to have in your role. And as a baseline, I need you to be respectful and kind to the people you work with. Like that is an appropriate standard. And so
Yeah.
I just think about like employers, like if you're so worried about this, like, are you doing a good job of setting fair, reasonable, and clear expectations with your employees? And are you measuring them against those in a thoughtful way?
Yeah, I agree. Because I think underlying this whole thing is basically an expectation that people always go, quote unquote, the extra mile. And it's like, if you have the expectation that people are always going the extra mile, then the extra mile is like part of the overall expectation. You know what I
Baseline.
mean? Then it's not extra anymore. It's just what you expect. Like, and if you think that people deserve, like you are deserving of their extra mile, like they don't owe you an extra mile. They owe you the number of miles you agreed to.
Totally. And I think it's also really like irresponsible. You've talked about burnout, and I might get in trouble for talking about this because I don't think it's been released yet. But Culture Amp has like millions and millions of data points about performance and engagement in the workplace. And some of the early research that one of our research teams has done is they were kind of examining the question like how sustainable is high
Mm.
performance?
Right.
right? So like how sustainable is it to go that extra mile? And what they found is like an absolutely minuscule percentage of people get like the highest performance score, whatever that is at a particular company, 2 cycles in a row.
Oh,
And
interesting.
so I think that tells us that like performance is more like a sine curve, or like high performance, like appropriately can be episodic. And so I
Yeah.
think it's just like, okay, that is true in the world, whether you like it or not is not relevant. But like the idea that, yeah, it's great if someone has like an outsized impact in a particular 6 month period, but that can't be the baseline, because
Yeah.
you're going to churn through people
Yeah.
and there's an organizational risk to that. So I think it just takes a bit more, quite frankly, like an intelligent talent strategy to say, like, I've had these periods in my job where like I have to overwork to get something done because it's critical or urgent or whatever. But like my baseline is that, I guess this is the other responsibility on me as an employee, is I'm very open about to say, hey, to accomplish these things that you put on my plate, this thing needs to fall away. Can we get agreement that like these are the things that are going to be executed in the capacity that's available for myself or my team? And so
Right.
it's a co-responsibility to get there. But I think the bigger share of responsibility sits with employers to not be unreasonable to their employees.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So I know I kind of had to like sneak in a random HR trend because they keep coming up, and I kind of just need to throw them in every once in a while to lighten it up and give me something to just drag to filth.
I mean, that's it. It's just like, yeah, it's even like the quiet quitting. I'm like, oh, so people, yeah, I just don't get it. I'm not into it. I feel like Gen Z, like there's all this research that keeps coming out that's like pearl clutching, that's like Gen Z wants companies aligned to their values. Gen Z sets boundaries with their managers. And I'm like, wow, what emotionally healthy things that these young people are doing. Like maybe the rest of us could learn something.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I like the perspective, especially now that you're an expat, of like, okay, sometimes you have to get an opportunity to sit outside of it and look back and say, okay, this is actually like not healthy, or this is, there are other ways to be doing this, other ways to frame it. So I like that you have the outsider view now.
I mean, it is officially January 21st in Australia. And like this week, a bunch of Australians are coming back to work post-Christmas.
Right.
Like, no, like very little in this country like happens between Christmas and the third week of January. And like
Yeah.
the country has not fallen apart. Like it's
Right.
fine.
Right.
I was back to work on January 2nd. But
Right.
hashtag American. But like that's just something to note is, again, like I really appreciate cross-cultural comparison because it shows you that like the way that things are normatively done in a place is not necessarily the way they must be done. And so it
Yeah.
opens up our imaginative possibilities of like what relationships are possible with work.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right, Aubrey, thank you so much for joining and just dropping all kinds of knowledge on us. If people would like to connect with you, or if you have any projects that you'd like to share, I want to make sure you can do that now. How can people connect with you?
Yeah, so I think the easiest is folks can get me on LinkedIn. I've got a very specific name, so I'm pretty easy to find. But if folks want to have a conversation or are interested in working with me or things like that, aubreyblanche.com is a great way to get a hold of me.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much. And thanks everyone for listening. Thanks for listening to another episode of Toot or Boot. You can keep in touch with me, Stacey, on LinkedIn, and be sure to subscribe to our newsletter at tootorboot.com. And if you're enjoying Toot or Boot, we'd appreciate your positive review on your favorite podcast platform.